else there, time-wise?
I have 6:30 also.
Okay, and we have a quorum.
We do have everybody but Alder Susan West with us right now, it looks like.
All right,
So,
well then I'm going to call the meeting to order, and we have a quorum to do business. The first item of which is the minutes of July 13th.
I'll move we approve. Don?
All right, we have a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second to the motion?
This is Robert. I would second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It is unanimous and the minutes are approved. Item 2 is 2021 operating budget. Sean, I think this is where you come in here.
great. And so I've got a couple of documents in the packets, one of which is a staffing projection. And those of you who were with the committee last year will recognize this. Those of you who were on council will also recognize this. It really hasn't changed for the most part, I would say. And so that was one sheet. Now, we have been given some instruction that it's unlikely that new staff positions will be funded in the operating budget here in 2021. But for completeness sake, we were asked to put this together anyway. So that's one of the documents. The other one is, well, there's, I should have backed up and said there are 3 documents. The other one is really just a blank worksheet that I'll be filling out. We got the worksheet last Thursday afternoon, pretty much as I was sending the agenda out. So I quick turned it into a PDF and gave it to you, just so you have a flavor for what sorts of line items and in what scale those line items are. But what we really need to start talking about is some decision items within the operating budget, because one of the new things this year is not only to scour sort of where we're at with this year's budget and projecting it'll end this year, and then putting together what we think things will cost next year, but also to offset any overall department-wide increases with a proposed deduction elsewhere. And for me, that gets into programming. So I put together in fact, I'll try to bring it up here if I can. Put together a spreadsheet.
Don, I have a question.
Yeah?
When you said it has to come out of other areas and you said that was program, I didn't catch the last word when you said it has to come out of.
Oh, right. So someplace out of our department's operating budget. So there are things we do that we have to do, and it's not really optional.
Okay.
Just as an example.
Just a general reference to operations then.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
All in operations. Exactly. So in fact, do you have this spreadsheet up on your screens right now?
No, I don't.
No.
Which there's three things that you provided us, and right now what's on my screen is just the agenda.
Right, that's what I have.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like it's giving me some trouble on screen sharing right now. Let me try to redo that.
Do you have more than one screen?
I do not. No.
Because a lot of times the trouble is it's displaying one of the screens that you don't intend to.
Yeah, no, this one is saying to me that it's paused, even though I just shared it now twice. And it won't let me unpause it to resume. So that's fine. Let me go to the version that's in the agenda itself. I was hoping to do this kind of live in a spreadsheet, but I'll just go back to the agenda since at least that's visible. If you shield your eyes for a second, you won't get dizzy. Okay. So this top grouping of items is all things that we pretty much do all the time. So we won't be doing bridge inspections next year. We do those just in odd numbered years. I'm sorry, in the even numbered years. So in the even numbered years, I ask for money, and in the odd numbered years, I ask for there not to be money. From the COVID perspective, this is good news. We won't need that $7,000 next year. Fuel prices also have gone down quite a lot. So I'll be needing less money for the same amount of fuel, fleet vehicle fuel next year. The city garage building's still fairly new, but some things are starting to break. This is a 2015 building. It's pretty high use. And our facilities manager, who's really in the building inspection department, suggested we look into preventive maintenance contract for the HVAC system out there. So that request I've asked for. Whether it's funded or not is a separate question, but for now I'm proposing it. Into snow and ice removal. The good news is we're using less salt. The bad news is it's so much more expensive that overall I'm projecting we're still going to need more money in salt. The $19,000 is a proposal that last year the council did not support, but it's to bring a snow shoveling contract for sidewalks in the downtown area buildings into the city's budget instead of the Community Development Authority, the CDA budget. This past winter, it was left in the CDA budget, even though they really are city sidewalks. So it's a reasonable request on their part to ask for the city to pay for it. And then there's a small reduction here too, because the school district has been buying slightly more salt over the years, but again, their price also will be going up because they buy it from us at our price. Oh, hi, Susan. So the school district buys it from us, so we should be getting more money from them. It's basically a negative expense, the way we deal with that. Street lighting, our energy costs have actually gone down some. I expect that we should be able to lower that expense a little bit as projections go. I could be wrong, but I do want to program that into the budget. And then recycling and refuse collections go up for two reasons. One, we typically bring more carts into the system every year to the tune of 35 or 40 new carts in our system. But also the price per cart goes up by a dime every year. So that just plain costs a little bit more money every year. And I don't know what Water Resources Management Commission is looking at yet, but the draft proposal that's going to them would look at $3,500. So in total, this ends up with a request for extra money to the tune of about $26,000 that we'll have to make up someplace, if that makes sense.
Sean, what is the Water Resource Management Commission item? What specifically, what outside service is that?
For the most part, we're looking at subcontracts that we have with Dane County, one with the state. We just at the council level passed one to participate in a leaf study, a leaf collection study for phosphorus reduction. We want to do a program where people are actually looking at stormwater management features and helping to assess their condition to see which ones are in compliance versus out of compliance, illicit discharge monitoring. It's all that WPDES kinds of stuff, the pollution discharge elimination systems.
Is that the entire expense, or is that just a portion of the expense that's allotted to the Public Works budget?
The entirety of that operating budget is in this line item.
And why is that? Does Water Resource Management Commission not have a budget of its own?
It does not, nope.
Oh, okay.
And it's staffed by Public Works, so we just put it in our budget because it doesn't have a better home.
All right. Understood.
And most of that stuff is mandated through national or state requirements. So there's not a lot of leeway with that, with those expenses anyway. What's required, we do. So in terms of draft potential reductions, just for discussion now, we need to get about $26,000, I think. If some of the above line items are not accepted by the committee or the council, that number could change. But for right now, I just started putting together a whole list of possibilities. I fully expect that some of these line items are not palatable in terms of service reductions. Probably most glaringly, closing the recycle center. Overall, that would save us some money. It would also forego some revenue. But it's a very popular and necessary program, I think. I just, in looking at the budget, was trying to put down all possibilities. They total up to about $52,000, a little over. So we don't need to accept all of this. That's why I wanted to talk it over with the committee before sort of finalizing it and submitting it in terms of what would the committee like to see for decision items that affect our budget. So in terms of service reductions, one thing that we can do, I don't know if it's helpful for me to just run down this list quickly, would be to do less patching, to put up fewer signs and do less road painting, to take a bigger risk on streetlight pole knockdowns that may or may not get replaced. Don't put any bus stop waiting pads in next year. We could save some money on that. And then a different option is to limit rental of equipment for the street crew to do storm sewer repairs. That's priority-wise for me, very low on the list of things to try changing. That's something, frankly, we should do more of, not less of.
Sean, is there a goal of how much you're trying to reduce this by?
Right now, my goal is about $26,000 because the things up here, I think I need to increase by $26,000. And I don't have a better way to offset those increases in expense other than to reduce some other things that we do, like patching or painting or concrete or recycling or storm sewer maintenance, something.
Don, what is that 140,000 or 130,000 for the sidewalk repair? Is that homeowner sidewalks?
It's both homeowner and city sidewalks, so it's any deficiencies in sidewalks. About $100,000 of that is reserved for trying to walk about 1/8 of the city in any given year, fix up handicap ramps, fix up major tripping hazards, especially at tree roots, and to keep us in ADA compliance.
But don't the residents pay for that?
There is revenue associated with that, so it's not all expense. That's correct. So the $10,000 reduction is within the 140. There are little internal earmarks that just we as staff try to control as reasonably as we can. So about 100 of that goes to sidewalks, and about 10,000 of that goes toward bus stops and bus kinds of improvements. Transit didn't have a separate budget.
So the $100,000 is in excess of what's collected from the residents or the homeowners?
Well, no, they're just in two separate line items.
Oh,
So we spend $100,000 and get back maybe 70
Okay.
as a revenue.
That's in a revenue line item.
Yep.
Okay.
Sean, you said something about the recycling center. Is it possible to not close it? Like, is that if we? I feel like that's something that we'd want to keep open if possible.
It is possible because I've identified more potential
Yeah,
service
what it
reductions
looks
here
like.
than I need.
Okay. Okay.
So this, to restore it, to not cut it, would cost about $26,000, give or take. And
What
that's
about-
part of why I wanted to do this live with an Excel sheet, but my computer's not playing nice today. So sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna. That's okay. That was my question. Is if we had some wiggle room, I think that's one of the things that I would like to see put back on the table as keeping it open.
Okay. Me too.
Yeah.
What about recycling pickup every other week?
It doesn't save us any money.
Oh, okay.
Well, this is just our recycling center, if you will.
I know that. I was looking at this curbside stuff.
Yeah, Pelletieri's contract, they voluntarily came in at no cost increase to pick up every week.
Yeah, they probably keep their staffing consistent and everything like that.
Yeah, I never drilled into exactly what their benefit was, and I asked them that. They were a little obtuse in their answer. There are clearly some benefits to us. People don't have to remember what week it is anymore. So there aren't people scrambling and calling and everything else. I couldn't figure out, are they getting more recyclables, by coming out twice as often? But they wanted to do it.
Yeah,
and-
just throwing it on the table, that's all.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, but it wouldn't save us anything.
I think I recall several years ago when Pelletieri came in and made the proposal to pick up recycling every week. And one of their arguments, and I don't know, whether that's panned out or not, was that they thought because after 2 weeks, a lot of the bins were full to overflowing, that perhaps they were losing some recyclables because they weren't picking it up as often as they might have. So if they pick it up every week, they get more than if they pick it up once every 2 weeks, which makes some sense, I guess.
That would, yeah. I guess I didn't see those recycle bins.
Sean, also, there were quite a few people that initially ordered the smaller size recycling bins, which frankly, I myself could fill up one of the little ones almost every week. So doing it every 2 weeks could be a real problem for quite a few people.
Well, or they could get a bigger cart, but
But that costs them money.
a one-time drop-off charge, yeah. But in any case, it
We will
wouldn't save
have
us any money.
angry citizens.
But I was going to say, if it doesn't produce any savings, there's no point in discussing it for purposes of this budget thing, because it's not going to do us any good.
Right.
Exactly. And there may be other ideas, either in the top half of this spreadsheet or in the bottom. I don't know if the committee agrees with everything I'm asking for up here, for instance.
Well, I was going to ask about that.
If the committee doesn't think the city should shovel its own sidewalks, that's a $19,000 expense that we don't have to figure into this $26,000. We're down to like $7,000.
Who
You
does
said-
it currently?
I'm sorry, you said that was one of the requests last year too. Is that correct? And that the council did not approve it?
Correct, yep.
And I wonder, Susan or Robert, do you recall what the council's thinking was on that?
I
We
think
never have enough money.
yeah, I think we all agreed that this really shouldn't be something that we forego, and that it should be separated out probably from CDA's budget as well and just put into a different fund. But either way, the funding was not available for anything. And so in the end, as I recall, that's why we just said, no, we're not going to touch it. Just leave it where it is and don't do anything else. I still believe that there's probably a change in where this gets billed to, but that could be done at some point, but it's still going to be a city expense. I don't think we would stop shoveling downtown.
I would hope not. One of my big concerns is the senior center with entrances on 2 different streets and elderly. And even with what shoveling we do, it's still it's problematic for quite a few people.
Well, do you think either of the counselors here, do you think that there's any change in heart by your colleagues on the council? Or if that's likely to go by the boards again, that gets us a long way home here. If we need 26,000 and that's 19,000 of it.
This is Robert. My opinion is we should plan on that $19,000 being on the negative side of the balance that we have to make up for. I don't think we can assume that $19,000 will not be spent. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, I think the answer is we're still at needing to find savings of around $26,000 unless there's something else in here that can be reduced.
Sure.
So, Robert, you're saying that you think that $19,000 will come out of our budget this year instead of, where did it come
Yes.
out last year? Where was it at?
Same
From the
thing.
Community Development Authority.
Which is as it is, yeah, CDA, which
Okay.
is as Sean said, for lack of a better place to put it, is just here, part of Public Works. It doesn't have a separate place to charge it, and there's questions of whether CDA is the right organization or not for that anyway. But I think regardless, that $19,000 is here to stay in the Public Works budget.
Just out of curiosity, if it got taken out last year by the council, what did it get charged to when the shoveling was done this past year?
To the CDA.
To the CDA?
So
Yes.
is the CDA planning the 19,000 though? You know what I mean? Like if they're doing the similar process, is the 19,000 somewhere else because they paid for it last year? Do you know what I mean? Like, are we
Yeah,
double?
I don't think so.
it's a good question. I don't know how their budget runs, and I know they would favor getting that off their plate in favor, in interest of fairness. But
Mhm.
but they've been really good about paying for it anyway, just because it has to be paid for. And they started the program, so they're kind of stuck with it until someone takes it over. I do agree with their argument that it really is a city sidewalk and we ought to pay for it.
Yes.
I agree. So for right
I
now,
do too.
I would leave it here as a
Yeah.
red ink on
Mhm.
our books, and then see what we can prioritize. And at the end of the day, come budget time, the Common Council is going to be picking and choosing what they want, but we are looking for some guidance from each individual committee and commission and board to say, we think this is important, we think this is maybe could be pushed off a few years, whatever. So I think that's what we're really here to do today, is to prioritize as best we can. Are there places we could lose some services to save money? And it's slim pickings, but maybe we can come up with a few areas where you're like, well, we could save off 3,500 here and 5,000 here on these other things.
Okay. The other thing that's in kind of the discretionary column, I'll say, if it's in this mandate column, we don't really have much say about it. They're contractual things. But this $4,000 request for preventive maintenance contract on our HVAC system at the Municipal Operations Center is discretionary. We don't have to enter into that contract.
Sean, so this
Sean,
is Brad Hopper. Real quick with that HVAC stuff, we're spending a significant amount of our money having contractors come out to look at that during the winter, quite a few different times during the year. There's been a lot of issues with that, and that's when me and Todd Parkos came together and came up with the conclusion that if we could have some biannual HVAC checks on that, we wouldn't run into the issues and spending, more money on that than we have to.
Okay, thanks. For those of you who have not yet met Brad Hopwood, our operations manager, I asked him to be here tonight because he's really plugged in on the operational aspects of the operations center and frankly, our operating budget at large.
and Sean, I'd like to speak on this one. With COVID-19 and the risk of getting infections and this current uptick in infections in Dane County was primarily due to people in bars, in office settings, and so on, where there's not enough air circulation going around, and the people are there for long periods of time. I don't want to put our employees at a risk that are sitting out there, especially the ones doing the office work. So we need to have optimal air handling.
Okay, well then I'm glad it's in here.
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree
go
that
ahead.
that one should stay because it just makes sense to have the preventative maintenance. I mean, I think that's a really great idea.
Yeah,
I think
and
that'd be
as
good.
Brad said, there may actually be that $4,000 spent here may actually either save us money or at least not be the full $4,000 because we may be spending, $900 every time somebody stops by in the middle of winter and a couple times in the summer, and all of a sudden you're at $3,800. It's probably not really a $4,000 hit when you figure out how much we're spending anyway to have people come out. So
Yeah.
I'd say leave it in here.
Okay,
I
Yes.
agree.
good. I'm sorry, I cut you off. Bob, was it? That
No, I
heard?
just said I agree.
Oh,
And
okay.
I don't think you should shortchange the preventive maintenance stuff. If the equipment starts to get 5 years old, it needs to be looked at, and it's going to cost you more in the long run if you don't do it.
Okay, so we'll leave that alone. Rock salt prices are not optional. Garbage and recycling pickup is not optional. These are deductions in expenses.
John, I have a quick question on the rock salt real quick with the schools.
Yes,
Knowing that they're not going back right away, are they going to be picking up as much salt? Are they going to be doing all that maintenance that they've been doing, or are they going to not put it down as much salt as they have been? I'm not sure if that's a question you guys would know or have an answer to, but my thoughts were if they don't have students going in there, there's not that as big of a liability with personnel and people walking there. They might not use as much salt.
they might
I
not.
think
and
it
it's always
depends on how
weather-
long they're closed.
Right.
Yeah, it's always weather dependent, but they tend to clear the lots whether school's in session or not. So even over winter break, for instance, they're plowing and shoveling and stuff. And the public frontages, of course, they have to in any case, but the internal stuff could be optional. I've just never seen them not do it. So it's a good question. I have not thought about it, and I did not ask them what their plan is if school remains closed, whether they're plowing lots or not. We could check, but I
that's
I
a
was
good
just going
question.
on history here.
I think,
Well, so
I
if
mean-
if they use less salt, that increases our task further, right? Because that's a negative number as far as this is concerned, the reimbursement number.
It
So if they
is.
use less salt, they'll be reimbursing the city less for it, and the 26,000 will go up by whatever that amount is. Is that not accurate?
That is accurate, but this is just a budget.
Yeah, right.
I wish I could say in my $3 million I knew what was happening, but I don't.
Yeah.
We're constantly adjusting things and playing little plus and minus
Yeah.
games internally. $2,300 is in the big picture, a rounding error. So,
Maybe we'll have a real warm winter and we won't have to shovel anything downtown and save $19,000 that way.
I love
So
it.
yeah, I probably wouldn't mess with that. As Sean said, it $2,300 is somewhat of a placeholder one way or another. We don't know
Yeah.
whether it's right or not. So I don't think there's anything there that we have to either worry about. If we don't get that $2,300, it probably won't be the end of the world. And if we do get it, it's not going to save the day either. So
Yeah, we'd be looking for, slightly more in cuts, but, you'll notice most of these at the bottom are pretty round numbers anyway, and are pretty flexible. So if we do $12,000 less patching instead of 10,000, it is what it is.
yeah, I'm struggling with. I think the top list, there's not much to be changed. So that puts the hard work of, well, what can we cut on this second list? And I tend to agree that the recycling center is not something that we should be cutting. One, it's a great service, and two, there's revenue in there too. And yes, it's a net loss of money, but there's a reason why people want it. It's a great service, and that's not a huge dollar figure for all of that. So I'd say that doesn't seem like something that I would want to cut.
I don't know whether it was by design, Sean, or just happy coincidence that the things left in the middle there, the 3,500, 5,000, 3,000, 10,000, and 5,000, if my head is working properly, bring us to about 26,000, I think.
That could be so. Yeah.
18 and 8 is 23, and 3 is 26.5 is what's in that block in the middle. Traffic signs and marking, street lighting, and sidewalk maintenance and storm sewers. But you said you didn't want to mess with the storm sewers necessarily.
To tell you the truth, yeah, in my priorities, I would have kept the recycling center and the storm sewers and worked with the others.
With
If you had your brothers, would you rather have $5,000 for the storm sewers, or take another $5,000 out of the street patching? That's not going to be a popular item either.
Well, couldn't we delay the sidewalk maintenance for a year?
Well,
I mean, that would save us, in addition to that 10, it would save us another, not counting the revenue that it generates, but save us another $40,000.
we have talked about that. Part of what we're faced with is if we don't have what would be considered an effective sidewalk maintenance program, we lose our liability shield from future lawsuits. So if we're not trying to comply with ADA actively and persistently, that could get us in legal trouble. And it's a pretty big risk for a couple $1,000s. I would advise against that.
But all the maintenance we do isn't for ADA, is it?
Most of it is, yes. We're trying to remove tripping hazards, keep slopes, fix up our ramps. It's all pretty much that kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And is there a threshold level that it has to be at, or can the amount of money that you spend on it be ratcheted downward some to save some money but still be in compliance?
I think there is some variability because it's not a well-defined term as to what an effective maintenance program is. We have already, in fact, gone from a cycle of 1/7 of the city to 1/8 of the city as the city has grown. That's not to say that 1/9 of the city would suddenly become a liability problem for us. But of that 140, only about 100 of it is actually sidewalk related. We do some mud jacking work, we do some saw cutting work, we do this bus pad work. Every now and then we try to coordinate with homeowners if they're replacing their apron anyhow and there's bad curb, we would like to go ahead and replace our curb at the same time. So if we're going to cut that much, we'd want to be kind of careful how we do it. But I think we could give up $10,000 in the short term without too much worry on my part.
Say, Sean, is the goal here to have the increases covered by the deductions equally?
Yes.
Or are you trying to come up with more deductions than additions?
Oh, some other department would be thrilled if we came up with more deductions.
Understand.
I wasn't
but
asked to do
what the
that.
goal is.
The goal is to balance. And
Okay.
so I proposed way more, knowing that we as a committee could talk and give direction on that and
Well,
balance
then I
these
like your idea
figures.
of if you drop the storm or storm sewers and the recycling center from your deduct, you're pretty much are equal, maybe even a little bit on the negative side still.
Oh, I thought we'd be on the good side here.
Yeah,
I agree with that too.
31.
The only one that hangs out and bites me is that, is the mayor going to buy into not filling potholes? He's one person, but
John, the mayor doesn't have a vote on this unless council's
I
tied.
understand that, Susan, but you know, he runs on streets and by
But
not
I
filling-
understand that.
One thing though is that we could
Out
maybe
there.
just limit, instead of cutting it by 10,000, Sean, you could do 5,000, right?
Cut
So we
it by
still have-
5. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'd still be at 45. We're going to
Right.
take care of potholes and then some with 45.
Yeah.
That's one proposal if we're worried about that. But otherwise, I mean, there's still some budget for potholes, right? It'd be 40,000.
Again, I'm not worried about it. I think it's a good thing, but you know, politically, is it the right
Yeah.
thing?
So, first of all, are we all pretty much in agreement that storm sewers and recycling collection, we're not recommending cutting those? Is that correct?
Recycling collection or recycling center?
Sorry, recycling collection, that
Yeah.
section down there.
Oh, this is the recycling
okay, I'm
center. It's in the overall budget category called recycling collection,
okay.
but this is about the recycling center.
Center.
Sorry.
No, thank you. That clarifies. So the recycling center revenue, salary, FICA, all that stuff, we're saying don't touch that. And then right above that, outside services for storm sewers, we're saying don't touch that, don't reduce that. Is that a good summary of what we're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
thanks. That was a consensus I was feeling, but it's good to hear it.
So the remaining 20, 30, 41, 5? No, that's not right. 31.5, maybe.
It's
Yeah,
about
31.
recycling is about 19,000 in itself.
So if we're trying to hit, what was it, 26.2?
Yeah.
And we're at 31.5 right now without touching anything. Yeah, absolutely. I think what Carrie suggested was we could add a little bit more back into the streets for patching. What are these other items do you really have heartburn about, Sean, to say, oh, you know, if I could just get a little bit more money back there, I would take it. I mean, all of them, right? But
I think by and large what the public will see in any given year is the asphalt. Not as much do we add more signs, do we refresh all the painting. If that slides for a year, I think people will be a little more understanding.
got it.
As long as it gets refreshed eventually. But and I think it's worth taking a risk on a streetlight pole knockdown that we may or may not be able to restore. But if it's important enough, again, budgets are kind of flexible. We can do that, but then we'll just have to do something else
Sure.
to make up for it.
Well, should we put 5,000 back into street patching and whatever remainder?
Robert, if you put 5,000 back in there, you're going in the wrong direction, aren't you? If you're going to
Then
make
we're at 26.5 with the savings if we put 5,000 back in.
Yeah.
Well, I'm missing something.
10,000 plus 10,000 plus 5,000 right there is 25. Then you have two 3,000s. That's 31. We only have to hit 26 too.
Yeah, so we have about $5,000 more in program cuts than we need to
Okay.
make up for.
So you would take those 4 items below the street maintenance, those 4, and then do the street maintenance item, but reduce it only by 5,000 rather than 10.
And
Correct.
I think that, yeah,
Yep.
and I think that gets us to
Okay.
what we're
That gets
trying to get to
explained to me.
today.
Yeah, that would about balance.
So moved.
Yep.
Sean, when you present this to the council, could you put in a statement about what we really need to have and that we have reduced it so that the full council understands that we're making some pretty significant cuts? So
Well-
that they've got a good picture, good big picture view.
That's part of why I wanted to call this, potential reductions, and to put in what the current budget levels are on these things, so they'll recognize these aren't just reductions, but they're reductions of some overall whole number.
Yeah,
Does that
and we're
make sense?
reducing current services.
That's right. Yep.
And that's what I think we need. Council's got to be aware of that.
Maybe instead of potential reductions, we'll call it service reductions to defer costs.
Yes, that would help.
Okay.
And then, Sean, this is Robert again. This form is good, but I certainly would like whatever's presented to council to say, yeah, here were some cost savings that the Public Works Committee really didn't think were safe to take. So you could
Right.
still show the $10,000 for sewer, or whatever it was. It's right below the line here. Yeah, 5,000, I guess, for storm sewers. And you could show the whatever thousands of dollars it is under the recycling center, but say we are prioritizing reducing these other ones, not recycling center revenue and its related things. We're not recommending storm sewer reductions because those are just too critical. These other things we agreed were more the low-hanging fruit. If there's any low-hanging fruit, these ones above are the ones we could lose a little bit.
You
Well
have
said,
to show
Robert.
that to council. I'm just curious. So like, if we make the decision tonight to not put the recycling center on this possible reductions, then I'm kind of just wondering why even bring that up to council, because it seems like it could just,
Open the door.
do we have to do that? Yeah, it seems like that could get kind of, I don't know. Maybe they don't.
We
I
weren't
agree with
asked
you.
to
It
do
would
that.
muck up the works.
Yeah, I feel like we should just go to them with like, here are make it as clean as possible. Like, here's our recommendations, because we're the ones that are, this is part of our job as a committee, right? So do we need to show them every single decision we've made?
Sean, what have you done in the past? Because my recollection at budget time is we see a lot of options and there's
Right.
a lot of picking and choosing. And I guess if we're going to, I'm not opposed to taking some of these things off the list, but the one downside of that is when everybody else says, here's options, here's options, here's options, and Public Work comes in and says, we're not giving you any options, this is what you get. Somebody on the Common Council is going to say, well, you need to do better. And at least if we can show that we already did the hard work and that, there were other cuts out there, but they were too painful to make.
Yeah, Robert, to follow up on that, this first goes to the Finance Committee, and neither Robert nor I are on that committee to actually defend it. So we would be having to defend it at the council level after finance has already made their decision, which makes it a lot more difficult.
And I guess what I was thinking originally, and certainly the committee can direct me otherwise, was we'll be listing these items that are not being recommended. They'll be listed in our minutes that we considered them and rejected them as our proposal to the finance committee. I could also list them on here just in terms of notes, you know, to, for instance, not show a $10,000 deduct, but I could write over here, you know, the committee does not recommend reducing this by $10,000. It just feels to me potentially more confusing to someone who was not part of this discussion as to what went into that and why. And frankly, we have lots of line items that somebody could point at and say, hey, why don't you reduce that?
Sure.
And that
I
is
think
part
you
of
need
my
to show
job
them.
is to say, oh, here's why we don't reduce that. You know.
So to backtrack on myself then, I tend to agree with what Carrie suggested, which is take it off the list here, but then do put in the notes, the meeting minutes or whatever, that we looked at other things, we determined that the ones we're presenting are the
Most palatable.
most palatable. Thank you.
Yeah.
Unpalatable.
Yes. And so then I think that is the cleanest. Then you're right, Carrie. Let's knock out the storm sewers and the recycling stuff, and then just list that on a separate place, saying we looked at those, but those could not really be cut, or did not make sense to be cut.
Don, did I understand you to make a motion earlier?
Sure did. It included deleting the storm sewer, $5,000, the recycle collection, and
reducing asphalt by 5,000.
asphalt, yes, $5,000.
Okay.
Is there a second to Don's motion?
And that approves also the staffing plan.
This is
Yeah.
Dan.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? I have one quick question on the staffing plan for Sean. The quarter time position, the engineering tech or whatever for the traffic, is that still going to be in the budget for this year?
That would be for discussion for adding next year in 2021.
Next year. Well, for 2021, right?
Yes, 2021.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion?
Just one point, you know, we talked about showing our homework or not. I just think that homework should be available if needed. If we're not going to show it directly, then we should be able to reproduce it at some point, so we have it.
And that would be easy to do because this agenda itself is publicly accessible.
Okay, but I'm good.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, hearing none, those in favor of Don's motion regarding the budget recommendation signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we will so recommend to the Finance Committee and the Council.
All right. I don't know. Well, we won't get to utilities for a sec. Oh, it looks like Dave Sarbacher is on the line now. I was just wanting to make sure.
We still have the capital budget too, Sean.
We do. I don't know if to get Dave back on his way tonight, if we want to skip ahead to utility budgets. It's your
fine with
preference.
me. Anybody have an objection to moving on to that if Dave's available now?
No.
No, I think that's a common sense solution here.
All right, if
Let me
Dave's
make
available.
sure that actually is Dave. He calls in. I'll ask him to unmute.
Yep, that's me.
Oh, good. Okay.
Hi, Dave.
Good evening.
Good evening. We're going to talk about utility capital budgets now.
Okay. And Dave's so far ahead of the game, he already put together a 5-year plan. So I'm a little jealous. but I think it'll behoove us to just focus on the 2021 utility plans, starting with water utility, if that's good, Dave?
Yep.
Okay. Do you want to give us a brief overview of these 5 line item requests?
Yeah, the water meter replacement is self-explanatory. We have caught up on pretty much all of our larger meter replacements. So that actually is coming down $20,000 this year. Water main replacement is with the road placement program. Water mains that need to be replaced along with the street reconstruction. We have another well that needs to be rehabbed. That's every other year. Well 8 was last year, and well 3 will be next year. Then vehicle replacement, 1 pickup, and the equipment replacement is a skid steer.
Okay. Dave, all of this is coming out of the water utility category of funds,
Correct.
which is from our water usage fees.
Correct.
So it's not as tight as our main city budget.
Correct.
Okay.
Dave, how
I
much of the
have no
water main
problems with this.
replacement is associated with street reconstruction next year? Because there wasn't that much street reconstruction next year, was there?
There's a substantial length of Mayflower,
Mayflower.
substantial length of Hubbard, and then Violet, Orchid Lane, and downtown Parma, Aurora.
Okay.
So it's a substantial year again.
Is this an increase from this year? I don't recall what the budget was for this year.
Yeah, a little bit. I think it was maybe 1.1 million last year, and I don't, I think that's about. I don't have that in front of me right here, but I think that's about what it was. It was around a little over $1 million.
Okay.
And as you can see in the 5-year projection, that some of the road reconstructions are not slated for water main replacement. So that starts to drop off after the next 3 years.
Which is good news for the water utility and for the road budget.
And I don't remember, Sean, was Middleton Beach Road next year?
That's in 22.
Okay.
That's in the 22 budget.
Yep. And we did move up some water main work on Dewey Court.
Dewey and Lake are also in 22. Yeah.
Yep. So
John,
there's substantial road work going on, or at least proposed for next year with the 5-year street plan.
John, do you want these as separate motions, one for the water utility and one for the sewer utility, or do you want to?
We typically have done them together only because the sewer utility budget is pretty streamlined, I would say.
Okay.
But we usually just talk about them one at a time in case there are questions or suggested edits. The sewer utility next year is really just one thing, just replacing mains with road projects. Anything we find deficient, we'll want to fix.
It's not relevant to our discussion for the 2021 budget, but what on earth are we going to buy for $475,000 as a vehicle in 2022?
The Vector truck, our sewer cleaning truck.
That would do it.
That one vehicle costs that much money?
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
That's why we don't have 2 of them. Boy, we could use 2 of them. We can't pay for them.
Yeah, we could use 2 of them. And that sewer lift station in Force Main, that's Middleton Beach Road as well. That's where those numbers come up a little bit.
Okay. Well, we're not terribly worried about that at the moment. We can deal with those next year when we'll all be rolling in money.
Yeah.
City will.
I love optimists.
Some of that just for the budget discussion. it shows it as a sewer vehicle. All $475,000 is in the sewer. That will be paid with partially with water utility funds because we do use it for main breaks and excavating around valve boxes and curb stops. So we're going to defer, or going to use some of the water utilities funds for that, that $450,000.
Okay.
So it won't be that full 475. It'll be probably 375 or 350.
Okay.
But just for ease for this, we put it on one or the other, with the water utilities vehicles being split with a little bit of sewer money as well.
Right. Yeah. Now, you can't budget 3/4 of a truck.
Sure. So obviously on the sewer main replacement has to happen. So I think 2021, there's not much discussion in my mind on the sewer utility side of this. Do we want to go back up to water utility for a second? I know maybe for stormwater funds, there's a little bit more leeway, as Susan kind of said, but in past years, vehicle replacements are usually the first thing that gets cut.
But Robert, since it's coming out of the water utility, the funds can only be used for the water utility, and we have sufficient funds.
So you think it's likely that all
Nothing's-
5 of these?
Yes, they'll all get passed.
Okay. Then,
Otherwise, we're just leaving money there from one year to the next year in the
Sure.
water utility.
okay. Well then, just to summarize, all of this stuff is pretty much a foregone conclusion. We can't skimp on the sewer repair, and these 5 items are likely to be fully funded anyway. So unless anybody is opposed, I would make a motion to approve both the water utility and the sewer utility budgets as presented.
I would second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the water and sewer utility capital budget request. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we will so recommend to the Finance Committee and the Council. Thanks, Dave.
Yep. Thanks, guys, gals. Stay
Thank
well.
you.
Have
You
a good
too.
night.
Thanks.
So then what's left is the general fund capital budget. And this is broken into 3 categories. We've done this for several years now. I wrote in red actually some really helpful target limits that the finance department staff and council have given as guidance, so that we kind of know in longer term planning what we're actually shooting for, what's reasonable or what's not reasonable. So the council's asked us to put together a $2 million package of road projects and about $100,000 of what they call other. And TID 3 projects really doesn't get into it, but it's easier for me to keep track of as separate road projects outside of the general fund. So we don't need to talk about that tonight. That usually the council takes on. And the Plan Commission, I think, may have some discussion on that. Oh, and the third bucket is new equipment, new vehicles that would come into our fleet. So I kind of put that under other, but it would all be part of this same $100,000. We just report it in 2 pieces, equipment and non-vehicle stuff. If that makes
Sean,
sense.
is the new equipment replacement of current pieces of equipment that are too old, damaged, whatever?
No, there's a completely separate sheet, interdepartmental, put together by our operations manager, Brad Hopwood, and our chief mechanic, Brian Gebhardt, that looks across the entire city fleet and has an allocation target of about $500,000 from the council to replace existing fleet. These would be additions to the fleet, brand new things that we don't yet have.
Okay.
And so for road projects, it looks like we're just a little over the anticipated funding limit.
Yes. One thing historically that's happened is we've sometimes trimmed surface treatments to match that. A different thing that has sometimes happened is to just exceed the limit. You know, because 5-year plans just don't round nicely. And the other thing is,
Yeah.
these are, again, ballpark estimates. They'll
Sure.
probably be refined by October, and we might find that 2 million is a better number for all of these things.
So I
Yeah, I
would
was gonna
say, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Robert. Go ahead.
I'm just going to say, I think for road projects, the little variance that we're seeing is just natural variance that we kind of don't touch, and I think the road projects look good. I'm a little bit more worried about trying to fit the 10 pounds of something into a 5-pound sack that is the non-road projects.
Yeah.
That's always our problem. And I think last year we might have had some discussion about, do we just start assigning future years to some of this stuff? Or do we let this be kind of an a la carte system? Whatever doesn't get approved this year rolls forward to next year and rolls forward to a future year. And that latter has been the tack we've taken to say, for instance, I think last year, the Public Works Committee didn't include any RRFBs as very high priority items, but the council did. And if they weren't on this list, it would have been very difficult, I think, for the council to say, well, let's move the Parmenter and South RRFBs up to something that is funded. So a little bit for us, this became a catch-all to say, look, we know we're not at $100,000. We're all about prioritizing it or getting rid of stuff that we just do not support at all. We don't even want the council to see it.
Yeah, that makes sense, Sean, to have, I think like the priority list, like you just said, like put these in order of priority and, and then, you know, like let's look through this and say like, oh yeah, let's completely remove something. But I like that idea of keeping it on there, knowing that we only expect whatever the first 5 or 10, whatever to get approved. And I agree with you, Robert, about the above the road projects. That I think that looks fine. We should just keep it, even if it's a little over.
Great. As I look down through this list, some of the individual items listed are more than the total amount available. Oh no, maybe not. Maybe
Oh
not
yeah,
more.
the mini excavator would be.
The
Mini-
mini
yeah,
excavator exceeds
one thing.
the whole pot.
So I think honestly, the new equipment is always a hard ask anyway.
Yeah.
Should we, with the $100,000 in mind, should we pick kind of what we think our top 4 or 5 items are for recommending spending money on?
That's what we have historically done at this committee, is shuffle these things. And again, that's why I was hoping to be able to work live. But if you can't see my spreadsheet, it does us no good for me to bubble sort these. But we can, just by using these priority numbers, you know, say move 19 to immediately follow 11. That works really well. And I can just make that happen later. You know what I mean?
Sure.
As long as there's some consensus. So in preparing this, I took things from last year in the order that the committee recommended them last year, but that they were not funded for this year. And then these are requests that came in more recently than last year's committee discussion. So, and some of the equipment was also recommended last year. I just try to keep equipment a little bit sequestered, even though we might say, oh, a small dump truck is a really high priority and should be 6.2, you know? Does that make sense to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and with the equipment, I think it might be easy for us to say, oh, that doesn't sound like a high priority, but Sean or someone else, let us know if maybe it should be, you know, if there's a particular project or reason to do that.
Exactly. And these requests
Yeah.
mostly come from our crew members who are finding inefficiencies or problems getting done what they want to get done. And they feed that through Brad, who asks me to get this on the list, and he provides all the justification. So if he's still on the line, I would welcome his input on this equipment.
So just to go over the equipment real quick here, with the 550 with the dump box, what happened is we ended up trading up 1 year for a bigger plow truck, so we could have our new crewman. I believe we hired him in 2017 or 18. So he could plow with an actual bigger plow truck instead of our smaller 550. When we did that upgrade, we lost what we used for the truck we used for shouldering. So that's why that's a higher priority. Plus, it also can haul around our skid steers, so we don't have to take one of the bigger patrol trucks out to haul around the skid steer. With the F-150 right now, they have 3 of them within the streets department, and we have 9 crewmen total with the foreman and the lead crewman. And to be able to shuffle guys around from job site to job site, it's near impossible to do that without them taking out, again, another patrol truck, which is going to cost a lot more money to run than an F-150 would be, obviously. With the mini excavator, I understand that's a big ticket item and it's fairly expensive. But I'm not sure if you guys have noticed some of the storm waterways that we have done over the past couple of years here, where we've dug some stuff out and actually got water to move in places that haven't been moving for years. One of the places I can think of right there would be Nursery Drive. There's not a whole lot of fall there in Nursery Drive, but we've been able to dig that out with our own crewmen, renting equipment, and get that water to flow, so we don't have the bigger mosquito problems there, stagnant water, and all the other issues that we've had in the past. The street painter, that's still on there. It's not as high of a priority to me because we do have the county to be able to help us out with painting, and they're fairly reasonable with pricing. They don't charge us nearly as much as, say, a contractor would. So we've been fairly we've been doing pretty good with them coming and helping us out. So that's not as nearly as high as a priority, in my opinion, as the rest of the stuff would be. And then just one more.
So Brad, these are in your priority order.
Yes.
Okay, I would recommend we just give that to the finance committee with your justifications, and they'll do what they want with it.
The only caveat I see with that is I think they're still broken up into 3 groups.
Yeah, well, I was just talking about the new equipment.
Right, but we might need to prioritize. If we say the Century Avenue traffic signal changes at Donna are super, super critical, but the next thing that's super critical is a Ford F-550 with dump box, I think we need to highlight that as well, because that $100,000 will not go far.
Right.
And that's always been a problem for me after, and this is kind of recent, but the last 3-4 years, I think, they've asked me to turn this in 3 separate lists: roads, other, and vehicles. So it's really difficult for me to convey that other than verbally telling people, yeah, this is more important than that thing on that other list. I almost wish we didn't do that, but we do.
John, can we somehow code it? Like if, I don't know, like in that blank column to the left, could we put, you know, priority number 1 is our, I'm not saying that this is, but is the dump box. You know what I mean? Like, is there a way to kind of color code it?
I wish, but it gets turned in a completely different format. It's more like the format you saw on Dave's spreadsheets. And the way they look at them, so it'll look like this, where it just has a project number, but that'll be, you know, Public Works roads.
But we've got the priority list.
Go ahead, Susan.
Yeah. if nothing else, give Robert and I the priority list and we
Yeah.
can interrupt finance.
That's kind of what it needs, because this first 2-character code identifies which list it belongs on, and these lists don't mix. That becomes my problem. But yeah.
Why don't you do that? And I promise to interrupt finance.
Okay. Be happy to do it, because that has been confounding. I love the way our finance department does this stuff. That's just one glitch we have not figured out yet.
Okay.
So Brad, I know you probably can't compare the equipment to everything else, but I mean, if you have to give up your firstborn child for it, which one? I mean,
For
is that dump truck?
Equipment-wise, it's going to be the pickup truck over everything.
Okay.
I know I have the dump box, the dump truck up top, but numbers-wise, and just looking at it and knowing what the guys are requesting the most is going to be a pickup truck over the rest of it. Just because, like I said, it's $38,000 compared to 65. That right there is a big one for me, because then you guys have X amount for everything else. Not that this is going to take priority over everything, because I understand it can't. And it probably won't, because there's a lot more going on than just what the crews need. It's like to me, I just feel like if I don't have this in here, then I haven't done them justice. Them asking me for stuff, just saying, oh no, they're not going to approve it. Why would I put it in there? But yeah, I would say the pickup truck is by far the one they would need the most.
The F-150. That keeps your crew working efficiently.
Yes, and also with this COVID-19, it keeps less people in trucks together.
That's very important. Okay.
Understandably, we always wear masks when we're in our vehicles with another person, but if we don't have to have 2 people in a truck all the time, obviously that's a lot better than the alternative.
Yes, I will make that very clear.
Brad, is the F-150, is that a crew cab truck that has a rear seat and stuff in it too, or just?
No, it's just got the single, so that way we have a bigger bed in the back, so we can put more supplies and equipment and everything else in the back of it.
All right.
Let's ask for it. Probably over a lot of other things. Let's ask for it.
I put it at the top.
I will just warn everybody. Trucks, equipment like this is looked at very critically by finance and common council, just because once you add something to your fleet, now there's ongoing maintenance costs as well. Whereas if you fix traffic signals at Donna Drive, it granted there's depreciation there too, I suppose, or things will fail after 15, 20, 30 years. But I'll just say pickup trucks will get looked at twice, but why don't we put it at the top of our list and see what else we can add to work up to $100,000, and then see what else is left, and if we have a lot of heartburn.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, because I feel like this new equipment has been on the list for years. I don't know, Sean, do you know when we've gotten?
I don't remember when we added a pickup truck last. In 8?
Okay.
2018, we didn't add a pickup truck. We added a skid steer.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
The last time you guys added a pickup truck, I can't speak to it. I wasn't employed with the city at that time. And I started in 2017, so it was before that.
Yeah, it feels like it's been a while.
Well, I would say just getting more efficient work out of our staff is, we're saving money by having them work efficiently. We get more done. That's the number one priority.
Safely.
Right.
Yes,
So it
and
sounds like
safely.
there's consensus to put the F-150 at or near the top of the list. What else do we want to put in there to spend our $100,000?
Well, and Sean, you said that this was an order of priority from last year in terms of the previous budget requests.
I did say that, yeah. Now, one change that I made was, you'll see in numbers 6 and 7, that were until very recently at the top of the list here. That was last year all one big line item, because it came out of the same traffic study. But I think the signal changes at Donna remain a high priority. the signal changes at Hedden and Q may get changed at some point with a county project anyway. So that could become a lower priority now that they're split into 2 line items.
Okay.
Okay. And Sean, what is it that the signals need to do at Donna Drive that they're not doing now?
It needs a dedicated left turn arrow from the side street at Frank Lloyd Wright and Donna Drive onto Century Avenue. It's just a green ball. Don could
That
tell you
costs
everything you need to know about
$20,000?
that. What's that?
That costs $20,000?
It's going to need a little bit refined programming. So I put in $5,000 to get a consultant to help us walk through some of that. And it's a ballpark estimate in terms of the hardware changes for the other 15,000.
Okay. I think that should stay up there then. It's number 2 on our list.
Okay.
I agree. I think we can maybe, based on what Sean said, and I kind of agree that County Q, there may be changes in the future. So I'd not recommend 07 as one of these.
I agree with that.
I agree.
Should we move that down the list someplace, like to follow 16? Or?
Yeah.
Sure, for
Yeah.
now. If I'm jumping around a little bit, but the Mary Street pillar repairs, is that the one that's the old school?
Yes.
Entry? Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it would be so nice to fix those, but every year that's the answer is, yeah, it'd be nice to fix that if somebody would fundraise for it, but the city's not going to spend the money on that probably right now. So
Well, and I always feel a little bad because I talked to a masonry expert and they're puzzled. They said we could rebuild them using brand new, but maybe older looking materials.
I'd honestly prefer that. I mean, but I don't value antiques as much as other people sometimes do. But I mean, some of them are in such bad repair that I think that trying to repair what's there is just a recipe for failure.
Yeah, they said they could try to
delay it
tuck point
another couple of years, it'll just fall down anyway, and then you won't have to worry about it.
Yeah,
That'd be
and
sad.
didn't we try to defer this to like the arts committee or something? Didn't we try to?
Somebody, who was that? We did try to pass that off, and no
It was the
takers.
Historical
No takers.
Society or something.
Right.
Is there a
I think there would
safety
be
issue?
a Friends of the Mary Street Pillar Committee or something. Fundraise to do that.
Right?
Is there a safety issue with it?
Nothing imminent that I can see. No, the bases are failing, but it doesn't look like they're at the point of tipping over.
Okay, so the safety issue would be it could potentially maybe tip over and that's it?
Yeah.
I think it's more likely to just kind of crumble away and one of the ball heads on top could eventually drop down, but I don't think the thing would just tip over like the Leaning Tower.
One of them's gone already, I think, the ball.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. One's
I would say let's wait.
I would too. I would be kind of
Okay.
curious if sometime in the future, I'd be kind of curious if somebody were to just replace them with newer materials that look old, whether that would also cost 20,000 or be a little less or be a little bit more, but that's not for tonight.
Yeah, I do think that they said that would probably be less expensive than trying to save what's there, which they'd have to augment with new blocks anyway.
Right.
What about taking them down and just not replacing them? How much would that cost? Like, I feel like maybe that would be what we'd want to do.
We could do that next Tuesday.
I think that I don't think it's on our list for now, and I don't think it's right now our decision, although it would be, it's certainly something that probably should be discussed again at some point.
This is just keeping a quasi-historical thing there. How old is it?
Oh boy. I looked that up.
The original school.
Yeah, that was in the early 1900s, but I don't recall the year offhand. I do have a nice photograph of it.
Okay.
I just mean from a safety perspective, if we are worried about it, I think maybe that would be the option at some point. I don't think we need to do it next year, but
I would, for now, I'd put it at the bottom of the list or
yeah.
Yes.
second to the bottom, whatever.
Yep, I agree.
I do too.
Me too.
Okay, so 12 could go below where 7 just moved.
Can I ask about the rail spur repairs?
Yes. The city of Middleton owns some railroad track. One of them is a spur line off of the 14 line that goes down into Greenway Center. And that's in reasonably good condition, considering it is almost never used. The other one goes north of 14 up into the industrial park, and that's used relatively frequently by Future Foam, bringing in chemical cars, and by Hall Lumber on occasion, bringing in lumber cars. But none of the other receiving industries are using their siding tracks, haven't been for a long time. But we've got rotted ties, we've got wide gauge, we've got loose tie plates, bad frogs, just everything that goes wrong we seem to have, and it's years of neglect. We have spent significant money making major upgrades, and that's helped. But what we haven't been is consistent about replacing, every 5th or 6th tie every 5 or 6 years, so that we constantly be renewing it. We sort of wait for it to break and then try to fix it.
This seems like something we need to take care of.
It
It's
could be
only,
an annual budget issue just for maintenance, I would think.
Yeah.
you said there was only one business that was using it?
2, Hall Lumber and Future Foam.
Do they have any other options?
We really don't. We sort of built that industrial park around the rail spur. All the industries that back up to it were going to have rail service. And there are siding tracks on both sides, but they're only used on the east. So that's been the frustration for them and for us. This is going back several years, maybe 10 years or so ago. Wisconsin Southern actually put stop work orders on that. They wouldn't bring trains in until we fixed some issues. And at that point, it becomes an emergency and things get expensive, and we're really limited on what we can do.
So do we have confirmation that those 2 industries are going to hang around for 10 more years?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a fair question. I don't know.
Was that a yes, we do, Susan, or a yes? to
No,
my
I
question?
think it's something we need to know.
I mean, here we are spending a lot of money for 2 customers
Yeah.
for their benefit, not ours, not the city's. I mean, the city could abandon those and it wouldn't be a problem. Other than the Santa train, I suppose, which may or may not ever come back. But
I think that's gone.
let's hope it doesn't. But anyway,
I could see
it
Future
seems
Foam
like-
being there in the long-ish term. They've made some pretty fair plant additions lately.
Yeah, I know. Well, how about Hall Lumber? I know, well, obviously Jack's not involved anymore, but his sons are, and I'm not sure how long they're going to hang around and before they retire.
Yeah, that's the one of those 2 that I could think might go away.
So before we spend money on that spur, I think we need some confirmation from them, even to the point of, hey, we want to repair this. If we don't have the money, can you contribute?
Yes.
Well, you'd be a little surprised the sideways glances I get when we assess them for their turnout repairs, because they're common, of course, to both the main line and the siding track. So we say, well, look, we wouldn't have a turnout in here if it weren't for you.
Yeah.
So when we
Well-
have to fix an extra long tie at a premium cost, we charge that to them.
So what are we missing, Sean? What on this? I mean, we're already up to, if 38, basically $40,000 for the F-150, and then another 20,000 if we do the traffic signal changes at Donna. So we're, almost $60,000. We only have 40,000 more to play with. Is there anything on? We've knocked out a couple of things, maybe.
Mhm.
Is there anything else on here that you would recommend to us, saying, well, this one seems pretty important to me?
I would say that some of these corrugated metal pipes, the storm sewer pipes that we've got in the creek corridor,
Yep.
Mhm.
really need a careful look.
So
And
number 10
number 10 is
is
fairly important because these things last 50 years and they're about 50 years old.
We should look at those.
We
Yeah.
haven't
So
got $60,000 to play with anymore.
well, there's always a little wiggle room. I might throw that on as the third one if I agree. If it's 50
Mhm.
years old and they have a 50-year-old life, it might maybe you say we can spend some of 2020's money. Maybe there's a little carryover or something and we can get there. I don't know. But
Sean, how many of these storm sewers are there? Could we say do half of them?
oh no. There are many more than that. In fact, part of what's in the where is it? Oh, down here, number 20, storm sewer video camera. We don't have any economical way to look at these things before they break. We've
Do you want this?
tried. Oh,
Do
go
you want
ahead.
the camera more than you want the? I mean, if you had the camera, that would make
Maybe.
future years a lot easier to figure out where the repairs are necessary.
We
That's
did a demo.
good
We
point,
did a
'cause-
demo with that camera last year. Myself, Tom Weber, and some of the streets crewmen did a demo with that, and looking at what they charge per square foot with videoing storm sewers compared to what that camera costs it's crazy the amount of money you would save with that camera just having it on your own.
per linear.
Well,
Yes.
not only that, you could run the asset to its final life, and there's no guesswork there.
Or less
That's the
guesswork
thing,
anyway.
because we don't even know what to prioritize. We just know we have rusty pipes, but we don't know which ones or where.
So I would
Then the storm
recommend
sewer.
number 20, storm sewer video camera above fixing the corrugated metal pipe lining for Pheasant Branch Creek, because really the camera feeds into solving that problem, maybe not immediately, but hopefully in a future year.
But it gives you the ability to make a data-driven decision.
Yeah, and we lack that right now. It's about $10 a foot for someone to come in with a hired camera.
And then
So
can we?
this,
Oh, sorry, Susan. I just was going to say, and then
Yeah.
put number 10. Do number 20 as our third item or whatever it is. Do number 10 as our fourth item, even though that already puts us then well over budget. They're kind of important, and maybe that means that in a future year that one rises to the top.
It's a good point, and it highlights
Yeah.
that they're related. We need to fix stuff, but we don't know which ones.
well,
So
if we have the camera, couldn't we then prioritize which ones need to be fixed
Yeah.
as
Yeah, that's
opposed to
Dan's
doing
whole
them all
point.
in one year?
Yep.
I was going to ask Sean, are there any of those corrugated metal pipes that you know specifically should and need to be repaired and should be repaired now? I mean, are there any of them that are in severe danger of failing and causing another collapse or whatever?
Oh, that's usually when we find out.
I know.
The ones that we did camera was right by Parisi Park. We did come up with a solution for that one, but that one's pretty deteriorated over there.
And that's the problem. If it's got a bad spot and we can bridge around it, the rest of it will soon follow.
Yikes. Well, so to summarize where we are right now, I have number 23 Ford F-150 pickup, number 6 Century Avenue, number 20 storm sewer video camera, and number 10 Pheasant Branch Creek CMP storm pipe lining, and that's already well over budget. And then we talked about knocking a couple of them down to the end of one of the lists, but we've already spent more money than we have. So leave everything else kind of in the same numerical numbers.
Yes.
Sounds good to me. I'd go ahead and move that. If
I would-
Sean all written down.
I have one other question for Sean. Was there anything else, Sean, that, I mean, you know, we had said the pickup truck and we made justification, but I know that I don't know what the replacement of old analog mobile radios, like, you know, some of those other items that weren't included in previous budget requests. Is that more important?
It isn't to me. With cell phones, we get by. The radios really are terrific for interoperability. So when we get into a situation where cell phones aren't working very well, and or when we need to talk directly to the police or EMS, we need our radios, but they work. We're getting by just fine. So if we go with that for another year before launching this replacement, I'm okay.
And the RRFBs were all added this year. Is there something that you know of that we should know when making this decision?
Those
That's a
really-
request from Bike Ped.
Okay. I mean, it sounds like a nice to have. I mean, everything is nice to
Yes.
have, but
Well, this would be nice to have.
yeah, I'm still feeling pretty comfortable with what we've prioritized now.
Well, what we've prioritized, if my math without a calculator is correct, is $158,000 out of an allotment, if you will, of 100. So we're 58% over budget. Are we comfortable making that recommendation?
Well,
We are.
Yes.
this is just priorities. I'm recommending
Yeah.
all of them.
Right.
But
Yeah.
if the council says, let's draw a line at 100 because we said it and we meant it, I'm okay with that. We've got them in the right priority order.
Mhm.
So Don, did you make
Hey,
that
I
motion?
moved. Yes, I did.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that will be our recommendation of the Finance Committee and the Council on the capital budget.
All right. I think that was our last agenda item.
I think so.
One more, and that was adjourned.
Oh, yeah. See, I missed it.
Oh, we can think about it for a while if you'd like.
Move to close.
So I'll second Dan's motion to
All right, motion
adjourn.
second to adjourn. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we are adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Brad, if you're
Everybody.
still here.
Have a good evening.